Hi, and welcome to the March edition of the Cinetopia radio show and podcast. I'm Amanda, your host, and on this show, we have lots of film topics to talk about. We're reviewing two big titles hitting the cinemas this month, Dune Part 2 and Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World. This month is also our annual Glasgow Film Festival special, where we talk about all the films our team saw at the festival and all our highlights. We also reviewed Tommy Monster and La Chimera as a team. Plus, I sat down with John Archer, director of Janey, the festival's closing night film. It's also in cinemas across the UK at the moment. Plus, we check in how we did with our Oscar predictions now that we all know this year's winners. All on this month's show, so stay tuned. So this month, Cinetopia has a real exciting few events coming up. We'd really love you to join us for. First up is Cinetopia Doc. That's our monthly doc club at the Cameo Cinema in Edinburgh. And we're presenting a program of two documentary films, Unreeling Dreams, that will take you across continents and deep down into the realm of film vaults and underground video rental stores through exhilarating cinematic journeys. First up is Kim's Video. It'll be the 30th of March at 6 p.m., which takes us on an absurd but extremely hilarious adventure to retrieve long-gone collection of videotapes. And then on the 17th of April, we have The Cemetery of Cinema, where the director embarks on an impossible quest to find a lost print believed to be the first film ever made in Guinea. So as I mentioned, first up, Kim's Video, which is particularly special to me as it was my local video store when I lived in the East Village in New York City. And for 2 decades in New York, Kim's Video was a go-to video rental store for any cinephile in the city. That was until 2008 when Mr. Kim decided to close the video store and give his collection away to a town in Sicily that promised to take care of it and make the videos available to any previous Kim's Video members. But when one such member, which is a filmmaker David Redman, arrived, the presence of these videos were mysteriously missing, and this film tells this journey of how they got them back. So extra exciting this month is the fact that the directors David Redman and Ashley Sabin will be at our screening for Kim's Video, which will be followed by a Q&A with the directors, and then we usually take the conversation to the Cameo bar afterwards for a little bit of drinks and mingling. So also this month, our regular networking meeting is happening, and that is this Wednesday, the 20th of March, from 7 to 10 p.m. at the Home Bar in Edinburgh. If you've not been to our Cinetopia networking nights before, this is one of our regular nights for the general film industry to get together for a casual drink and or chat. So yeah, we hope you will join us for one of these events, and I hope to see you there. So welcome to our March edition, and I'm here with the same team from last month, fitting because we are talking about a lot of the same things, but this is Simon and Gary are back to talk Glasgow film, to talk Oscars, to talk big movies in the cinemas right now. So Simon and Gary, how are you?
Yeah, good, thanks. Thanks, Amanda. Yep. Yeah, it's nice actually coming back with the same team to discuss the Oscars in Glasgow. It's been a busy few weeks since we last spoke. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this episode.
Yeah, thanks for having me back again. It feels like this is the Dune Part 2 to the Dune Part 1 of last month's episode. One big kind of Glasgow Film Festival and Oscars focused episode.
And we've all, as we were briefly talking just before we started recording, all went to the Glasgow Film Festival in various degrees, but can you tell me a little bit about your experience? It sounds like it was quite busy. I was there for one day and watched a lot of the films through screeners. Tell me what you guys thought overall in terms of like the busyness, and we'll get into the films later.
Yeah, I was the same. I only went through for one day, and it was a super busy day actually. I probably spread myself a little bit too thin in terms of like traveling through from Edinburgh, 2 films back to back, like barely any gap in between. And then I had to get back to Edinburgh for a live comedy show that night. So it was like, yeah, by the time I sat down to the comedy show, like I just really, like I wasn't in the mood. But
that's what film festival's all about.
Yeah, I kind of had festival fatigue in one day. But I watched a lot online, and yeah, I thought it was a really good festival. And from what I seen on the day and then heard about the rest of the festival, it was really busy and we got great attendances. Everyone loves the GFT. It's such a cool cinema. So yeah, I think it was another rousing success for their 20th edition.
Yeah, it was very, very busy. I went quite a lot. I live in Glasgow, so it was easy for me to pop to the GFT or to Cineworld, the satellite venue, and see quite a lot. So I saw the majority of the films I saw in person. Um, and yeah, packed houses almost every time. The day we bumped into each other, Gary, was I think the busiest day that I experienced there. That was a Saturday, so naturally that was a lot busier. But almost every screening I went to was sold out. We're bunching up for seats, and a good selection of industry and talent appearing as well. It seems like more films this year than previous years had the director or some stars appearing in the screening with us and doing an unexpected Q&A, and there were just lots of directors and people hanging about. I passed Viggo Mortensen when I was going into the GFT one day, um, and passed the director of another film we'll maybe talk about. Yeah, so just really busy, a good slate of films, a good time for Glasgow and for film.
Yeah, and you mentioned industry, and there were a lot of industry events. I went to one day of industry stuff as well. So it was a really great buzz about the city and about film in the city. And so we're really happy to talk about some of the films. I think we all saw a whole bunch of films, but from different perspectives. So we have a lot to talk about later on in the show. But first, we're going to get to what happened I think we're just going to see how well you both did if you put some bets on the Oscar. So I'm curious about how it ended up, and what you thought of what we talked about in terms of predictions and what happened.
I think I did better this year than any other year. I was quite pleased. Yeah, I had a little bet with a friend just to see who could get the most predictions right on the night, and then it was like the loser buys the pints next time we meet or whatever. And I got 21 out of 23 right at the awards. So
that's very good.
The bookies weren't letting you do like an accumulator bet really this year, so you couldn't I didn't really make that much money from it. But I think I mentioned last time that I bet on Emma Stone way back in September. So I actually cashed out of that bet the day before the SAG Awards because I thought Lily Gladstone's going to win the SAG, and then Emma Stone's chances are going to kind of like fall. So I thought I was right. Lily Gladstone won the SAG, the cash out dropped, and I thought I was played this pretty well. But then obviously Emma Stone won, so I probably could have won a little bit more than I did. But I got a good little win on Zone of Interest, winning Best Sound, which I know that was one that we spoke about in the last episode. So again, ties in. That was quite a good price because I think Oppenheimer was the favorite. So across the board, I was quite pleased with who won most of the awards. I think ceremony was good, like compared to previous years. I think it was kind of one of the stronger ones. But Jimmy Kimmel was kind of safe pair of hands for presenting. How did you get on, Simon?
Yeah, not bad. I had money on Lily Gladstone as well, so I lost out on that. And I'm pretty sure from how she acted at the ceremony that Emma Stone thought Lily Gladstone was going to win as well. So I lost out on that, but my overall predictions of a kind of Oppenheimer sweep were more or less correct. But because those were, the odds were in the favor there, I didn't win a lot on those. I just got back my money and some piddling little penny amounts. I same as you, I won big on the best sound design because I'd also gone for Zone of Interest when the odds were pretty long against it because, like you say, people thought Oppenheimer was going to win. And I did well on that. I think I got, in overall, I got Best Picture, Best Director, Best Actor, Best International Feature, and Best Sound. So not too bad. I didn't put bets on all of them. But not bad.
I think by the time the Oscars roll around, the prices, like for example, like I think Da'Vine Joy Randolph was something like 50 to 1 on to win. So if you you need to put on £50 stake to make a pound profit. So it's just like there's no money to be made in a lot of these categories. So it is kind of like well, this is how I do it anyway. I kind of like look at how things go in the BAFTAs and then SAGs, and then look to see where there's little like discrepancies in the market, and then try and like zone into that, which worked this year with a couple of them. So yeah, it was quite good.
Yeah,
Well,
I mean,
Sorry, I was going to do the highlight of the whole ceremony was, of course, the "I'm Just Ken" performance from Ryan Gosling, which I thought
absolutely.
he didn't win his Oscar. He's been nominated 3 times now and hasn't won, but I feel like this time he kind of won the Oscars in total.
Well, yeah, I had money on him for best supporting, because I thought they'd throw something to Barbie as kind of an acknowledgement of its impact. But you know, the huge impact he had at the ceremony is, I'm sure, more than enough.
I think from the original predictions, which we talked about in general, it happened exactly as we expected. I think the one I didn't know, and I wonder if you guys had thought, and I missed that, was American Fiction winning Best Adapted Screenplay. Like that was a bit of a shock for me, but a good shock because we talked about how much we enjoyed the film last month, and I thought that was a nice sort of surprise. And yeah, I everything else sort of seemed, and as you said, best sound for Zone of Interest, which I was extremely happy about. But yeah, I thought that was a little bit of a change up, or did you expect that?
No, I didn't see that coming either. I think I don't think I put money on it, but if you had asked me, I would have said Oppenheimer as part of the whole Oppenheimer sweep.
Yeah.
But I can see how it wins that compared to the other things it's against. Like Zone of Interest is great. It's very loose adaptation. Same for Barbie. There was this whole controversy about it being an adapted
Yeah.
property since it's not coming from any kind of written text. It's from this IP. And Poor Things, we talked about it on the show. I don't think it's a good adaptation. I think it's a good film, but I don't think it's a good adaptation. So I can see how American Fiction comes out on top there.
I think some of the critics of American Fiction have said that the book's a lot darker, I believe.
Yeah.
I've not read the book, but I have seen some criticisms of it, similarly to Poor Things being a good film, but not a great adaptation. So I mean, it was in my prediction list the day before, but I think that was one of the categories that kind of twisted and changed a little bit in the days leading up to it. I was quite pleased with both the writing award winners, actually, because I think American Fiction and Anatomy of a Fall were my two favorites from the whole bunch, really. So for them both to pick up the writing awards was quite nice. I think surprise-wise, the one that I was a little surprised by was The Boy and the Heron winning animated feature. I was pretty bad at watching animated films this year. The only nominee I had seen was Elemental. But I just thought that I think the first Spider-Man movie won the Oscar like a couple of years ago, wherever that came out. So I kind of expected them to award the sequel as well, because I think the sequel had even more critical acclaim than the original. But I guess it was a bit of a swan song for the director of The Boy and the Heron, so kind of makes sense that he was to win that. So that was one of the ones that I got wrong.
We'll see if it's actually a swan song. I'm not sure he can stay away. But yeah, that was also, I think, a bit of a surprise. I like that The Boy and the Heron won. I like that a great deal. And thought Across the Spider-Verse wasn't as good as the first one. But yes, surprising. On Best Original Screenplay, I'm so glad that Anatomy of a Fall won, because I love that film so much, and I think it's a terrific screenplay that deals with such kind of rich themes. So yeah, very pleased that Justin Trier won for that.
Yeah, and as you briefly mentioned, Gary, the Oscars seemed a little better this year. I think there's been this conversation around trying to bring numbers up. You had mentioned that they put it on ITV, so maybe there's a lot of British talent that was nominated. Perhaps more people were watching it over in the UK, but that Gen Zs are actually getting into the show now. So that it seemed like it's come back a bit for through the past couple of years. It's had some rough periods, especially during the COVID pandemic when we had to cancel it a couple times or delay it or whatnot. Obviously the Ryan Gosling was quite good. But also I liked the Billie Eilish one as well. So I really liked all the numbers and things like that. The only thing is, I don't know if you both stayed up. I did stay up and watch it partially because it wasn't a total Oppenheimer sweep, because I thought maybe halfway through I would just give up and go to bed. But I stayed up. The only thing that was amusing and annoying was having Jonathan Ross in the middle, like having to comment. So I don't know if you saw that in person, but there was one guy in their group that didn't like Oppenheimer, so he kept me going, you know.
So I tuned in to intending to go until, I don't know, midnight, 1 a.m., whatever. But I got 5 minutes into the kind of Jonathan Ross British wraparound stuff that they were doing around the actual ceremony, and turned it off. I just couldn't stand it. It was the most cringe kind of uninformed panel discussion, and I was surprised because I like Ben Bailey Smith. I think he's a very good critic, but just didn't work in that format for me at all. I found it terribly annoying.
I think it was Ben Bailey Smith who I liked take, but then he kept getting interrupted by Jonathan Ross, which was like really like slight. Well, it was offensive. It was just annoying.
Yeah, I don't know really how they put together that panel of like so-called experts. Like I know that Ben Bailey Smith's a film critic, and Jonathan Ross has got his history in film. Like he used to present a film review show. But yeah, the ITV coverage was really poor, and like they just seem to fill so much space with like, okay, what can we talk about now? And it seems to be, it was the same at the BAFTA red carpet. There was a Scottish journalist who took a lot of flack for like being just really like misinformed on the red carpet and like bad at interviewing, where the kind of the token question is just like, well, what did you see first, Barbie or Oppenheimer? Like the media coverage seems to be obsessed around the whole Barbenheimer thing, which again, obviously it was a big summer, but like, it's just, there should be more to discuss than like, oh, what did you see first? It's like a little bit reductive. So yeah, I think that coverage, the ITV coverage, was pretty poor.
It was dreadful. I just want the ceremony. I'll just show ads instead of this panel discussion. I'll put up with some ads. I just want the ceremony.
You know, I was watching thinking like they should have got like Amelia, I don't know, I might butcher the pronunciation, but Amelia de Moldenberg, who does the chicken shop date, who's like really great at interviewing people. She's got like her own style and stuff, and she's British. I was thinking like maybe they could have got her on to like do the British coverage, only to realize that I think she was actually doing the social media coverage on the official Academy account. So I guess like she's kind of surpassed the ITV level already. But she's great. They could like I would have watched the British coverage if it was her or maybe anyone else. It's almost like bring back Alex Zane at this point because Jonathan Ross was so bad.
Yeah, if ITV do keep it for next year, I hope they change it. I hope they have a more film focused, film discussion with people who seem to actually enjoy the films.
Well, that's a uniquely UK experience to have these wraparounds as I remember fondly the Oscar parties, which is why I think I was interested in your bets, because we always had ballots and whatnot, and then you always do have the ads, and that gives you a moment to talk to people, sort of go over what you're happy about, not, or whatever, and there's a fun to it. So that annual thing, but yes, that I'm with Sky TV. I thought they weren't great, but it wasn't this bad. It was just, this was pretty apparent, and I think on Twitter people were responding to it too, saying how bad it was. So, but apart from that, and another year in the Oscars and what happened, and we can look to the next year of films that will make it to that ceremony, and we'll be talking about one that's a big one coming up when we come back.
It's okay. I'm here. It's been a while since you've had one of those nightmares. Tell me, what was it about?
It's only fragments. Nothing's clear. You've been fighting the Harkonnens for decades.
Look!
My family's been fighting them for centuries.
Your blood comes from Dukes. than great houses. Here, we're equal. What we do for the benefit of all.
Well, I'd very much like to be equal to you.
Maybe I'll show you the way.
All right, so you can't miss the next film at the cinema right now that we're going to review, and that is Dune Part 2. And we'll give it to our resident expert on Dune, Simon, to tell us about this film.
So Dune Part 2 picks up after Dune Part 1, obviously, with, spoilers for Dune Part 1 ahead. But Paul Atreides is on the desert planet Arrakis, where his father has been killed and the Harkonnens have taken over the planet. He's taken in with the Fremen, who are the kind of indigenous people on the planet, and he's slowly learning to embrace his kind of mythical destiny, this kind of chosen one status that has been forced upon him. So Timothée Chalamet plays Paul Atreides, who is leaning into his leadership of the Fremen and his position. Rebecca Ferguson is his mother, who becomes the Reverend Mother for the Fremen, and Zendaya is his love interest, Chani, who is a native Fremen who lives on the planet and knows the ways of the desert and teaches Paul how to live in the desert. I mean, there's a huge cast that I don't want to go through all of them, but it's a big adaptation of the Frank Herbert book, and has this kind of epic scale to the grandeur of the images. And it's I didn't find it too dissimilar from Dune Part 1. So if you want to go back and listen to my thoughts from the Dune Part 1 episode, they're not hugely dissimilar. I think this is a better film, but we can get into the discussion of it as we go. I'm interested to hear what you two think.
I agree with you. I think in terms of it's obviously if you like the first one, you're going to like this one. There's a lot Denis Villeneuve builds upon that. I think the first one was quite slow in terms of he's taken his time to establish who the Fremen are, who the Atreides are, who the Harkonnen are, the different planets. And it makes for a slower movie because he's establishing all that. Whereas in this one, it's all established and it zips along in terms of the pacing of it. I feel I think it's just short of 3 hours, but it doesn't feel like that at all. I think I would say I was less blown away by this one, only because I think there's more worms and it's the big scale, but I think I was kind of going into I kind of knew what I was getting myself in for this time in terms of the big booming score and it's a very invasive sound design. But I kind of, because of the first one, I was kind of expecting it. So, but I do feel what makes this one so great is the fact that there's just the cast is so stacked. It's crazy. Anybody in terms of popular actors just now are there, and some of them don't come into it until an hour in or 2 hours in. So it's sort of it doesn't give you a chance to even to get bored in the thing, because it's maybe you're oh, there's a little bit of zone out 40 minutes in, and then bang, there's Austin Butler's introduced. So I think it builds upon the world really well. Pacing's great. It's a solid middle chapter in terms of it builds upon the second one, and it really I know that this is I think this finishes the Dune, the original source material.
This finishes the original novel, but Villeneuve wants to do a third film which adapts Dune Messiah, which is the second book that Herbert wrote.
So I guess without getting into too many spoilers, it kind of leaves you wanting more in terms of where the characters are going to go next. So I guess fans of the books will have a better idea of that than me. But what did you think of it, Amanda?
As I briefly mentioned, I don't remember us doing Dune on the show, but I definitely didn't see it. So I did Dune in a day, and then a little backstory of learning all about what had been done before. I'm also surprised I didn't see the David Lynch version either, which I'll have to go back. I think it's I think it lives up to the hype overall. It's not my type. It's not my cup of tea, this kind of genre. So it's not really something why I haven't really engaged with it. But I think it's a film that I need to see in the cinema, and everyone should see in the cinema because of the experience and the impact of the film. Because I saw the first one on my TV, and it was so I wasn't as impressed by it as the second one, which is just for obvious reasons. But I did find it to be, as you said, like lots of huge actors in there. It's a little bit, I guess it's like a little like the Wes Anderson or the 1917 of of films where you just next thing you turn around, there's another famous actor in the film. But yeah, overall, like it, a really like an interesting science fiction massive blockbuster. I think it will be a film of our. I think sometimes people are saying this is like the Lord of the Rings or obviously Star Wars, which is the one thing I obviously noticed was all these, similarities to Star Wars, which is clearly because Star Wars took inspiration from the original books and the source materials. So then you have this weird dialectic, I guess, where you have kind of the Dune coming out later after Star Wars came in. So how much are they kind of responding to the source material, but also then responding to the obsession with Star Wars and the years and years and years of Star Wars stuff. So that was where my head was like, does this seem reductive of Star Wars, or is this the original material, or where is this coming from? Because it obviously felt like a modern Star Wars in lots of ways, thematically, but obviously then I looked and I read a lot about that this was, I think the Star Wars story was basically stolen from Dune. I don't know if you guys know more about that.
Yeah, I mean, George Lucas is very open about his influences. So there's like hidden fortress for the kind of narrative, but he did freely pick out these various elements like sandworms, desert planets, various religions in space for kind of the Fremen and the Jedi. Yeah, I mean, I think I liked it as much as the first one, and I wasn't that hot on the first one. So I think Villeneuve has this kind of boldness that he brings to a lot of his films. I think that's why he was a good choice to make Blade Runner 2049, because it's fair. He's quite Ridley Scotty in how he approaches films. There's this coldness in tone and style. It's interesting that he's co-written this with John Spates, who was the writer of Prometheus, Ridley Scott's kind of prequel to the Alien franchise. But it's also cold. It's also hard to emotionally connect with. I think I found it a little easier in this film because of the groundwork that Gary mentioned had been done in the first film. So all the characters are established, and we can focus on the kind of weightier themes of kind of religion, coercion, control, colonialism. Paul accepting this messianic status, even though he knows it's false. He knows he's a false prophet, just using these people for grabbing his own power. That's interesting, and that's an interesting approach. It's good that they focus on Chani, on Zendaya's character, because that gives it a kind of emotional basis for us to connect to. She's the kind of spurned lover who is also in love with Paul, but who resents that he's taking this messianic path that is bad for her people, bad for the universe. But it's all a little dry, and some of the best scenes are the weirdest scenes. So when Paul is having his drug-induced visions, when he's having his spice-induced visions, there's a talking fetus. Rebecca Ferguson's character is pregnant and talks to the fetus, who has been influenced by the water of life that she consumes as part of a ritual to become the Reverend Mother. And the scenes on Getty Prime, which is the Harkonnen homeworld, they're great. That's all shot in black and white. All the exteriors are shot in black and white, because the black sun of the Harkonnen homeworld leeches color from the environment, and that's like a great thematic touch, and it looks great. And they're weird scenes because it's all Austin Butler dueling in a stadium for his birthday, and he's very strange in that. And Austin Butler is just great in the film. We talk about the cast, but Austin Butler really stands out because he's doing a pitch perfect Stellan Skarsgård impression. Stellan Skarsgård is playing his uncle, the Baron Harkonnen, and he's doing such a perfect Stellan Skarsgård impression while also being just weird. He's really great, and he actually made me want to go back and finish Elvis, which I couldn't get through. So yeah, I just wish it was weirder, and I wish it leaned into more of that strangeness. And ultimately, I do feel the same as I felt about part one. It's promising a lot that is coming. It's like, oh, we're going to get into this next time. In the next film, we'll really get into this. We'll really explore this world. Don't you worry, it's coming. But it's been 6 hours now of this coming, and I kind of need a little more. So I liked it. I like seeing huge spaceships taking off and landing, and Denis Villeneuve is very good at that. But it doesn't have the emotional connection of Arrival, for example, or even Blade Runner 2049, which I know he can do. He's just not bringing here, and I think it picks up a lot of the flaws of the novel in that sense as well, because it's quite a cold novel.
I'll just say what you said there about Austin Butler being like doing a Skarsgård thing. I'd seen a funny tweet where somebody was saying that Austin Butler is a better young Skarsgård than the actual young Skarsgårds in terms of like Alexander and Spill. But I think in terms of what you're saying, this it is a weird film, and it does deal in big themes. There's a Messiah theme running through it, and it's kind of like a big allegory. But like I think Villeneuve does a great job of like dealing in these big weighty themes, but also presenting it as a big blockbuster that's accessible, that people are going to want to see. There's so it's like it's an intelligent, smart, like intimate film about these like these important themes, but he's kind of like packaged it in a blockbuster way where you can go along and maybe not get too weighed down in the weirdness of it, but they just want to go because because Florence Pugh's in it, or Austin Butler's in it, or obviously Timothée Chalamet, he's got like a huge following, or Zendaya, and like the list goes on. Actually, I think you're right in terms of Zendaya being like she's like the heart of the film really, and she's the kind of the moral compass, and everyone else is kind of losing their mind a little bit, and she's very true to herself. So I think she does a great job. So it's funny that like all the men are kind of shouting and fighting and thinking that they're the most important thing in the film, but really it's like it's all the women in the shadows pulling the strings, the Reverend Mothers, Charlotte Rampling and Rebecca Ferguson. So it's quite interesting from that aspect of it as well, seeing like these like power, the power struggle and the power shifts throughout it. Because I think obviously the big comparisons are being made to Star Wars for obvious reasons, and then for Gladiator as well, in that kind of middle section that's filmed in black and white. It's kind of like very Gladiator-esque, which kind of like again relates to your Ridley Scott comparison with Denis Villeneuve. A film that I've not seen it being compared to, maybe it's just that I see this in films where it's not there, but Timothée Chalamet's arc is kind of reminding me a little bit of Michael Corleone in The Godfather, where he's kind of like, in the first film, he's kind of taking a step back from the reputation of his family, and then in this, he's kind of for whether he likes it or not, he's kind of being put forward as the new power figure, and it's how this like corruption slowly starts to take hold of him. So it'll be interesting to see how his performance. I think he's great. I think he obviously like in his stature, he's like a little twink boy, but he can like carry this film in some ways. He's very powerful on screen, I think. So I think he does a great job.
Just to say that's a really good comparison, the Michael Corleone one, and from what I know of Dune Messiah, I think the arc is kind of continuing into The Godfather Part 3 of this trilogy.
Yeah, I think you both brought up really good points. One that maybe why I did enjoy the film over others recent blockbusters is it's kind of nostalgic or really like, old way of making films, and I think there is something there that's really 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 powerful. And I also think what you said, Gary, is that it's quite a challenge to make such a big blockbuster where we're expecting sort of something with all these famous people, plus also make something that is respected by a huge legacy of films and TV shows and source material that's come before, and a complicated one from what I understand. It's not the easiest story to tell. So I think that there's a lot to put together in 6 hours. So in that way, I think it works well. I didn't really like Timothée Chalamet, but that might be because I am it's hard for me to see thousands of people bow down to him, like I don't know, like just mentally that's where I kept his performance, him as a person who's a character that in the world, like it's very hard for me to separate. Where I think with Austin Butler, also, a love interest of many probably young adolescents, our fascination seemed to fall into that his character a bit more. And Zendaya, I seem to really feel like worked well, but Timothée Chalamet was hard sometimes just because he is Timothée Chalamet. So, I mean, not to say he didn't do as good of a job as he could, but I just don't think he could get out of who he is as a person. But that might be my personal bias.
Yeah, I think I'm more down on the film than you, Gary. But just to echo, it is nice to see a big blockbuster that is attempting to deal with these weighty themes around kind of religion and messiahs and colonialism and stuff like that. And nice to see a film that is so clearly taking inspiration from Islam and Islamic faiths and Islamic peoples. Especially in this current political time. I think there's a question about whether it's taking inspiration from or appropriating certain Islamic things.
Yeah.
Which again, I think comes back to a problem with the novel itself. But again, nice to see a big blockbuster attempting to do these huge things and grapple with these weighty things. And it's clearly resonating with people. It's clearly connecting with people a lot more than it connected with me. So I think that's great.
I mean, the multiplex near me was packed, and I don't think there weren't very many other films they were playing. It's playing on the hour. So the screen I saw it in was the biggest screen at the cinema, and it seemed pretty full. So for a Saturday evening. So yeah, and this is 3 weeks in, right? So or 2 weeks in, I'm not sure. So I mean, it's still bringing lots of people to the box office, which is great. We like that in general. So
yeah, go and see it on the big screen. That it's worth it for the scale and the sound of it, and it's quite nice to see such a long blockbuster that the takeaway from people doesn't seem to be that it feels too long. So yeah, it's got a tick in the box there in terms of being almost 3 hours, but it flies by, I think, for me anyway.
Yes, maybe. I mean, it looks great. Maybe a best visual effects next year at the Oscars. We'll see. Maybe it'll get forgotten by then, but I think it looks really good.
Yeah, it does, and it's going to still be out in the cinemas if you want to go see it. So we have mixed reviews here, but yeah, check it out. Dune Part 2 and Dune Part 1 is on Netflix at the moment. So if you've missed Dune Part 1, which I did, you can check that out before you go. So the next film we're reviewing was part of Glasgow Film Festival, but also I think London Film Festival, was at Locarno. It's Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World by Radu, Jude. And Simon, give us an overview of this film.
Yes, so Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World is a kind of satirical black comedy from Radu Jude. It stars Ilinka Manalecha as Angela, who is an overworked and underpaid production assistant, film and TV production assistant, who is driving around Bucharest to film equally overworked industrial workers who have been in accidents. So a lot of the film is her driving around and interacting with these workers who've been in accidents and interacting with the various people in her life and being overworked and being dead tired all the times that she's doing this. The film identifies itself at the start as being in conversation with a 1981 film, which is about an overworked taxi driver in Romania. And there's clear similarities between Angela and this character in this other film, least of which is her name, because the film is Lucian Barato's Angela Moves On from 1981, which itself features clips from Casablanca. So there's this kind of postmodern meta textuality to these film within film within film. And the film is presented in two main parts, where the first part is Angela driving around Bucharest, filming these people. The second part is the raw shot of them attempting to interview this industrial worker who they've chosen to talk about their accident. And it's just a single shot on this person as they talk about their accident and as their narrative gets warped by the production process. So it's kind of the whole film is kind of a reflection on work, on overwork, on capitalism, on corporations pushing people to the brink of madness, of tiredness. You know, Angela is constantly pointing out it's not war or it's not the Roma people who are to blame for social problems around them. It's corporations, it's oil companies, it's worker exploitation, it's institutional corruption. There's even a bit about kind of the imperialism of the British state and the British monarchy, because this is kind of taking place around the shift from Queen Elizabeth to King Charles. And while Angela is driving around, she also has this foul-mouthed alter ego, who is kind of an Andrew Tate figure, this kind of men's rights caricature that she plays on TikTok, and this character is apparently becoming quite popular, and so a lot of the film is also interspersed with those TikTok videos of her as this gross male alter ego who's kind of an extreme caricature of this particular product of capitalism. So it's an interesting film. It's a long film, and I think it does test the patience of the viewer. It does test the patience of the audience deliberately, as a kind of deliberate provocation. It's got that kind of subversive feel to how it's doing that. I think I'm more of a sympathetic viewer than most for this kind of hostility towards the audience, to this kind of anarchic cinema, and for the politico-economic messages that it's ultimately trying to get across. But it did test my patience at its length and at its deliberate wasting the time of the viewer, and kind of reveling in it. I don't know what you thought.
Yeah, I actually I'm used to that because I happen to be a Godard fan. So I think I did hear people making or have often made sort of like suggestions that this is very kind of in the spirit of Godard.
Yes, I've written that as well in my notes. This feels like it owes a lot to Godard, and I'll just say I don't like Godard either. So,
so there's probably where we both like those who like Godard, check. Those who don't, But yeah, the idea of like, as you very eloquently put, like patience. It's like testing the audience to sort of stick with this idea of like time and taking a really long time to kind of there's a lot of these car scenes where you're just watching Angela like just like listening to music and driving through the chaos of the modern city and
trying to keep herself awake.
Yeah, exactly. Drinking coffee, and it's I mean, the obvious connection too, and I think you mentioned there's this combination of form. So there's black and white with kind of the modern day, and then when you go into like the TikTok sort of, that turns into color, and then when you go into the previous film that was from the 80s, the Angela, like that's kind of like brings back the the sort of parallels these two Angelas like in a car. That's also in color. So there's this like mixture of form that I think I personally think works. I think I'm quoting exactly from Little White Lies. Like car culture is neoliberal culture, and this really felt like like not an homage to Weekend, but the same thought that was happening in the with Godard's like 60s, which is the car has taken over the world, and people want people think that it's a liberation, but it's actually this like it's bad, and it's she feels locked and closed in this, and all she wants to do is kind of get out of this car, and but she's stuck with this gig culture that's been forcing her to do this stuff. So she's doing these kind of rather sometimes annoying things and throughout the film but just to kind of cope with her life and her her frustration with that. Also, as someone who has done corporate video for way too long in my life, I find the satire on that like to be spot on and also quite amusing. And there's an element to that which I think fits a little bit, like the triangle of sadness sort of like there's that satire to that which I really like. So I like the way that I'm forgetting the director, the Swedish director of Triangle of Sadness, but very similar in that kind of work of like poking fun. Yes, poking fun of different cultures, whether it's like rich people or art people or whatever. This film is definitely like poking fun at the video corporate world or the filmmaking world, and I think that works with the last, as you were saying, the last scene that kind of is shifting the narrative of this, of this person's what they attempted to do. So I liked the fact that it was like quixotic, but also like strange, and it didn't have like there's the narrative is it's in two parts. It's strange, but it works for me. So
I think I like it more in theory than in practice, because I do that last segment that you talked about takes up the last 40 minutes of the film. It is them attempting to film this industrial worker talking about his accident, and he is slowly, over the laborious process of getting this talking head shot, he is having his spirit broken by the kind of neoliberal production process and by this corporation attempting to mold and cut off bits of his story to fit into the kind of mold that they have for it. The idea of how he should be presenting this safety video. And it ultimately leads all towards this kind of homage to Dylan's Subterranean Homesick Blues, which is very funny and that works. But it comes at the very end of the film, and I felt like I had my spirit broken by the first 2 hours of the film, which is largely Angela driving around. It's interesting that you mentioned Weekend, because the whole thing, a large chunk of the film reminded me of that one long shot in Weekend with the traffic jam that goes on forever, where the characters are just walking by this traffic jam, and it's one of Godard's deliberate provocations. This is kind of in homage to that. It tested my patience. I just lost patience with it. There's great images. I think there's some really interesting subversive images, like they go to a cemetery where it has a big www.cemetery.ru URL on the side of it. There's a huge billboard overlooking the cemetery advertising real estate, kind of looming over them as they're mourning. Those are kind of really interesting static images of this kind of pervasiveness of capitalism. It kind of reminded me of Roy Anderson in this way. These kind of static images that have been set up to satirize. And I really like those in isolation. It's the whole thing where it's packaged together to be provocative. And I really felt like it was wasting my time, because I got what it was trying to say within the first hour. I felt like it didn't feel that deep to me. It's not trying to say too much beyond what we've already talked about. Overwork is bad. Capitalism is a terrible thing, and I don't think it had the depth in its messaging to justify the length or the strain it put upon the audience.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I'm much more amenable to this kind of provocation of time, and maybe I agree it wasn't maybe necessarily serious, but I didn't expect it to be serious. I would say that I'm not really aware of all. I haven't seen the other work that Radu's done, but I also I'm now, this actually makes me more curious of what would be like the Romanian new wave, I have seen Cornelius Parumbu's, I messed up that pronunciation, some of his films. We reviewed one and I really didn't like it, and then I saw one at Berlinale, Infinite Football, and I really didn't like that one too, which was like one of those films that everyone says is one of the best documentaries, like, or or mixed films, and I don't. And there's these similar elements of just like throwing something in that doesn't seem relevant, and yet when you hear them talk, well, this of course is really relevant, and this kind of mixture of form, which we've talked a little bit about, like one half, well, 2/3 of the film being one thing and a third of being another thing, and then testing your patience. But I think for me, maybe it's either I have to be in the mood, like, and I watch the film with this mood of expecting this, this long duration and this kind of thing. And maybe when I saw Porumbu's film, I was not in the mood, but I think I liked this one better. Maybe again because it's more satirical. Well, Infinite Football is satirical as well. It just maybe I like this person's tone, this director's tone more.
But maybe I did need to be in the right mood for it, and maybe I wasn't in the right headspace when I watched it. Because to be clear, I don't mind a long film. We talked about Occupied City, recently, which I adored, and is an intensely long film. And yeah, it just felt like my time was being wasted, in a way I didn't appreciate. But I think I would if I was in the right mood for it. Yeah.
Well, no, I think it's perfectly fair not to appreciate it, which is what I was saying. Like with Infinite Football, I definitely didn't appreciate it, and I also think that it might rest on the lines of like, the Godard, the Godard sort of aspect as well. If you like, it is provocative to force you to sort of watch this stuff for so long, and you don't have to like it, but like your time being wasted, like, because
I feel like I've heard a lot about it, and I've heard a lot of people talking about it because it is worth talking about. It's an interesting piece. I specifically saw Cahiers de Cinema had it as one of their top 10 films of 2023, but in watching it, that's no surprise because it's so Godard. It's so Godard, and I can't connect with Godard or that kind of filmmaking. I think I need to give up.
That's and I think as I get I see more films, I become less attached to the Godard. I think the 22-year-old in me appreciates it more than me now, but yeah, I also feel like it's very, I think it was at Locarno and it won some jury prize of some sort, and then his previous film won during the sort of his lockdown film, won Berlinale a couple of years ago. It feels like a very Berlinale winner, which is great. And so I appreciate it. It's worth seeing if you're like into the cinephile thing and want to see what Cahiers du Cinema thinks is the best film of the year.
Yeah, I think I appreciate it more than I enjoyed it.
So that is do not expect too much from the end of the world. It is currently out in UK cinemas and actually will be at Glasgow, I believe, on the 25th to the 28th of March. So this week, one of the places you can see it in Scotland. I'm not sure where else. So if you can catch it there, and also in other places in the UK, and I do believe that Mubi is in the US is distributing it. So Sovereign here is distributing it in the UK and Mubi in the US. Let us know what you think on either on Simon's side or Amanda's side here.
Yeah.
So. All right, so now we're on to our Glasgow Film Festival recap. You heard us last month talk about sort of the films we saw in the program that we were looking forward to. So now we've come back from it, and I think we've all kind of tackled different parts of the program. Simon and Gary probably saw a lot more films, but also similar films. I tackled more of the documentaries. So overall, we talked about the busyness, but now we're talking about the films and the program, and I just wanted to get everyone's overall, feeling about the program and what they saw in terms of films.
So I didn't see as much as last year. I think I did too much last year. I saw about 20 films over the course of the festival, and I dialed it back to about half that this year. Just for my sanity. But I saw some great films. Tommy Monster and La Chimera we're going to talk about. I also saw Love Lies Bleeding, which opened the festival, and I think is out fairly soon. That's the new Rose Glass film, who did Saint Maud, and it's very different, but has this same kind of tenuous grasp on realism that Saint Maud had, that I really appreciate. And I think it's a really strong kind of revenge thriller, take on the revenge thriller, that will be really interesting to see how audiences respond to it. There was a kind of Czech focus, so I saw a few Czech films as well. Restore Point, which is this kind of sci-fi about restoring your biometric data to another body when you die. Kind of interesting. Lousy Carter I saw, which is a comedy about a university professor. And that film has a really interesting kind of ambivalence about its own existence, which I don't want to get into too much detail about, but I really appreciated, and I really found that kind of central joke about whether the film thinks it should exist really funny. I don't know if other people would find it the same, but I enjoyed it.
I saw Lousy Carter, and I thought it was good as well. So yeah, I saw it. But Gary, how about you? What were your highlights?
Yes, I was same as Simon. I think I saw around 10 films, so didn't dive into it as deep as I have in previous years. So yeah, we'll get on to talking about Tommy Monster and Black Chimera. But another one that I wanted to mention was Jericho Ridge, which was like a survival thriller set at a sheriff's office, all kind of like one location, and it's kind of like a bit of a riff on Assault on Precinct 13, or like a riff on like Rio Bravo, which Assault on Precinct 13 riffed off of. So it's the directorial debut of a British filmmaker, and they filmed it in Kosovo, but and it's mostly a British cast, but they're all playing Americans, and but I just thought the look of the film and the tension in it was so good. It's like little like 80 like under an hour and a half, and I just thought like some of the ideas in it were great, and good central performance from Nikki Amuka Bird, who was in she was in M. Night Shyamalan's Knock at the Cabin a couple of years ago. So yeah, that's one I was going to give a shout out to actually, I did an interview with one of the actors and the director, so that'll be publishing that on Cinema Perspective in a couple of weeks, I think. I also saw Restore Point, which I enjoyed. It was part of the Czech focus strand of the festival. That every year they pick a different country to focus on. Thought like it was great in terms of like how it looked. Like it looked like it had so much money spent on it. It looked like a big kind of Hollywood sci-fi, so slick and stylish, but like it was made on a relatively low budget, I believe. So it kind of shows how a small budget can go quite a long way in terms of like creating a really cool aesthetic for the film.
I'll have a review coming out for Take One about it at some point, but I highlighted the low budget and how good it looks. I kind of compared it to The Creator, the Gareth Edwards film that came out a few months ago, because I think it does so much on such a small budget. It's really impressive.
Yeah, I agree. I think like I've read a few criticisms of that. It kind of like borrows its idea from a lot of other sci-fi films. Maybe I've just not seen as many sci-fi films as other people have, because I thought it was like quite a cool premise and executed it pretty well. Another one that I'll just mention quickly is Opponent, which is a Swedish film about a Persian guy who has to flee his home to start a new life in Sweden because he gets outed as being gay, and he's a wrestler, and he kind of like runs away with his wife and his children to Sweden to kind of like start this new life. And it's a brilliant performance by the leading guy, Peyman Madi, who people will recognize from A Separation, the Farhad, what's his name? Farhad Agari. Anyway, big, huge film, A Separation, from like 10 years ago. So it's the same leading actor that's in that. He's, I think that's one of the best performances of the festival. I saw a few others, but those were the kind of main takeaways.
Great. And so, as you both mentioned, your reviews of the festival are on your respective sites, so Cinema Perspective and Take One magazine. So you can read their full reviews on your sites. And so I took a different direction than the both of you, and I went purely documentary mostly. I saw a few films that we'll talk about, but I also found it interesting, except I saw Bill Douglas, My Best Friend, which I thought was I was interested in. I think I've seen two of the trilogy that he's done, so I was curious about kind of this biopic. Lots of biopics, by the way, but also and it was a lovely film, so I highly recommend if it shows up. It explores the filmmaking of a filmmaker that many people don't know about, but an important Scottish filmmaker. And so I thought that was a lovely film, and I wanted to give it a thumbs up. The other three films randomly were, and we'll talk to John Archer, who directed Janey, which was the closing film, as part of the show later on, an interview with him. We're all about cancel culture, actually, like in some capacity. So I think a little bit with our interest and love of Tar last year, I think these are the documentary form of that. And so I saw Sorry Not Sorry, which is about Louis C.K.
Was that the Louis C.K. one? Yeah.
Yeah. And that, I think, is Dogwoof. So that will probably be coming out, in lots of various forms in cinema. I also saw Janey, which we'll talk about more. And then I saw John Galliano, High and Low, which is a movie release, which is currently out in cinemas as well, but will be on Mubi. It's interesting because all of these people did something that canceled them in various degrees. Now, Janey Godley is someone you know in Scotland, but maybe you wouldn't know like internationally, except made this real famous sign, when Trump came to visit Scotland and, got kind of a moment. But other than that, I think perhaps her road to coming back was different than Louis C.K. and John Galliano, where John Galliano and Louis C.K. were both extreme, very public, international sort of like cancellations. And perhaps it's how much they're they were involved in the film. So with Kevin McDonald's John Galliano, he really tackles a long, it's almost an Errol Morris style, interview with John Galliano, who has literally come to this film, I think, to, improve his name and to show that he's sorry. But Kevin McDonald does some incredible biopics about people. Whitney is a good example, and Marley, and I think he does the best job he can to tackle this, as evenly as he tries on both sides, where John Galliano said famously, had said some very anti-Semitic rants at a bar, and is coming back in the fashion world, but was largely one of the most infamous fashion designers. And then after this happened, he was fired from Dior, and he, so it shows his kind of road to coming back to the fashion industry, and whether or not, again, the same idea with Tar, whether or not he's a genius or not. And I think one of the things with that is that he has friends. I think both him and the Louis C.K. one, he has friends in high places, or they sort of helped him get back. And I think that it makes me think a lot. So I highly recommend seeing that film when you can. With the Louis C.K. film, for me, just a far more, unlikable. I mean, neither one of them are likable, but just an unlikable character here, and just seems to get away with coming back, with kind of bringing the people who would take him back on, like the anti-Me Too sort of people. I think that film is far more against Louis C.K. than John Galliano, so it's not as empathetic, but it also doesn't go into the it doesn't go into both sides as much, or it's not as full of a picture. I wouldn't say it's not a good film, so I wouldn't I would tell people to watch it just for the subject matter. It's an important film, but it's sort of a more depressing. Well, they're all depressing, but depends depressing end. Now, obviously, Janey will talk about with John a little bit more, but yes, that's my take on what I saw, and we'll be back with a review of Tummy Monster. All right, so we're going to be talking about Tummy Monster, which was a film that was part of Glasgow Film Festival, a Scottish film. And Gary, I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit an overview of this film.
Yes, so Tummy Monster is the directorial debut from Kieran Lyons. It's Scottish micro-budget film. I think it was shot in 5 days, and it follows egocentric tattoo artist called Tails, and he's played by Lauren MacDonald, who people might know from Beats from a few years ago, or he's got a small role in Bridgerton on Netflix as well. So he, when the film starts, he's kind of like the middle of the night, looking through his phone, kind of like in a bit of a dark place, and he gets a knock at the door, and in walks a musician who I think is kind of like based around a bit of a Justin Bieber type. He comes in with like his manager / bodyguard security guy, and says that he wants to get a tattoo in the middle of the night. I think it's supposed to be about 3 a.m. So he gets a tattoo, and I guess like Tails sees this as a bit of a chance for like something good to happen in his life, a little bit of a redemption, that he could earn some street cred if he like gives a tattoo to this like famous musician. So he does a tattoo, and then afterwards, as the musician's leaving, he asks if he can get a selfie before he goes to capture the moment. And unexpectedly, the musician said no, which creates this little dispute between them, and that's the kind of like the crux of the film. And they spend the night together in this tattoo studio, and it becomes a bit of a kind of like war between them, and Tales's life outside the tattoo studio starts to kind of unravel a little bit through phone conversations and text conversations. And yeah, I thought it was really interesting and great. Like Restore Point earlier talked about, it makes good use of its budget. A film that it reminded me of a little bit was another Glasgow Film Festival film from about 10 years ago called Lock, which was directed by Stephen Knight, and it was Tom Hardy in a car for the entirety of the film, the whole story told through outside conversations. So I guess there's like similarities to that in terms of it being the one location. I think it feels like quite it feels like it could be performed on stage, and I think both the actors are great. It's Orlando Norman that plays the musician, who they credit him as Tummy in the end credits. So I guess like which comes onto the name of the film, but they never really refer to him as Tummy during the film, as far as I know. But his kind of like little, it kind of like deals with celebrity culture a little bit in terms of like how if we think that we know somebody that's famous, what entitlement do we have to their time and to get a photo with them, and it kind of plays with that's a kind of like the initial kernel, and then the film kind of like uses that as a springboard to kind of delve into themes of fatherhood and love and responsibility and adulthood. So yeah, I thought it was really fun, and it goes to quite a dark place. It takes some twists that are quite interesting. So yeah, I think I'd be interested to hear what you guys thought of it.
Yeah, I really loved it. I liked how like you say, the music star, the pop star is never named because he's just someone you should know. He's just someone you know. So there's no need to name him. He's like a kind of Taylor Swift figure, I suppose. He's so famous, everyone in the world knows him. And so the kind of tension of him coming into this Glasgow tattoo parlor and being so weird about not giving a selfie is a great way to build that kind of tension that the film is based on. I've compared it to, I think Locke is a great shout. This kind of confined, really tense film. But I've also compared it to Uncut Gems in my review, because I think it's got that sense of underlying tension and anxiety that Uncut Gems does so well. But I really like the look of the film as well. I don't know. I know you interviewed the director, Gary. I don't know if you talked about the look of the film, but I think he and his cinematographer, David Little, make the film look really interesting. It's kind of this mix of neon lighting and deep shadows and vape clouds. The pop star character's always vaping. Both of them are always vaping. So there's always these thick clouds of vape that kind of, for me, kind of accentuate the psychological torment of the film and highlight this contrast between light and shade that the film has, because there's this kind of silliness to the film. It's quite, there's a silliness, a humor to it, especially that Lorne MacDonald brings in his performance, against this kind of serious tension and this serious psychological breakdown almost of this character. And I think that's really highlighted in the look of the film, these shades of light and dark. So I just loved it. I think it's a really strong kind of chamber piece and really unexpected for me. It just does something new and really interesting. And I think that's what film festivals are all about, discovering these kind of new voices, new talents.
Yeah, I would agree with the both of you. I think I was probably less into the film than the both of you were, but in terms of a unique piece where it shows off a like original talent and a story that's kind of able to stay within within a budget, as you said, like 5 days of filming, and really works in terms of a debut feature. I think this works really well. I think all of what you described, in terms of storyline and was great. It's probably not I don't know if it was the fact that it reminded me a little bit. I don't know why I said pie, but just like this kind of, these kinds of films that this emotional sort of dark thrillers. It's not they're not the films that I love. So, it's probably just a taste thing. But in terms of talent and, effort and work and how good it looks, as you said, I think it was great and kept me interested, and I enjoyed it. So yeah.
I've seen a lot of people who said it was annoying, said they found it annoying, which I can absolutely see, because there's a kind of annoying central premise.
Yeah.
That is part of the psychological torment. For me, it was so much part of it that I didn't mind it at all. And maybe I have a high tolerance for this kind of repetitive, annoying stuff, but I didn't find it annoying. It only in the sense that it was part of the torment. It was part of the problem, the psychological breakdown of this character. So I was so invested that I wasn't bothered by that.
Yeah, I agree. I think I think there's a repeated line throughout, which I think has kind of grated some people. But I think that's entirely the point of it, because it's like kind of like the trigger to Hales's kind of descent into madness and this kind of like journey that he goes on. And I think I agree that the film does look great. It's kind of got this kind of grungy, dirty, like neon sleaze aesthetic where they're like, how do you keep a film visually interesting when you've only got one space to work with? So I think that's a credit to the camera, the cinematographer and the director and the production team. How do they deal with that? I think like the way that the camera swoops and swirls and kind of like that kind of like mimics the madness a little bit of Lauren McDonald's character and the kind of journey that he goes on in that short space of time. I think he's like all three performances are great. I think he's an actor that I've liked for a few years. I really enjoyed his kind of breakthrough performance in Beats, the film I'd highly recommend about rave culture in Scotland in the early, I think like in the 90s, early 90s. So yeah, he's definitely one to watch. He's turning up on all these big TV shows now, but he's got a good like sensibility for indie filmmaking, and him and the other actor Orlando Norman, actually they collaborated on the script as well. So there's a sense of improvisation in terms of like the arcs for both of the characters and how they kind of clash, because like Tails is this kind of like he looks mad in terms of like he's a goth, like his hair dyed black, he's got all the piercings and tattoos, like he looks like a kind of mad tattoo guy. And whereas like the musician is kind of he looks super cool and chilled, and he's kind of got this demeanor where he's like nothing phases him. So it is interesting to see these two characters flung together for an hour and a half and see how they kind of like their energies kind of clash, and it creates this tension that's kind of like grips you through the film. But there is like moments of humor and silliness in it as well, because like really when you take a step back and look at what the film is about, it's ridiculous. But I think that's part of the fun, part of the enjoyment of it.
Yeah, I think both lead performances are terrific, but I really appreciated Orlando Norman's stoicism. He's so calm throughout the entire film, and he's almost otherworldly. He's this very strange performance of this kind of bringer of chaos. But there's like a few shots, like literally one or two, where he suggests something deeper, some kind of deeper despair to this character, just behind the eyes, and that's a really subtle thing in the performance that doesn't come through in the script at all, but it just entirely comes through in the way he carries himself and his facial expressions, that I thought was really good and added real depth to that character.
Yeah, I think they both got to play around quite a lot. I think from what I heard, like you say, I got the chance to interview Kieran Lyons and Lauren McDonald, so that interview is available on my website. and they spoke quite a bit about that, about how like the big ideas of the story were in the initial script when it went to Lauren and Orlando, and then they kind of got to like create what their character was to be and how they could kind of become that character. Because I think Tails initially was supposed to be older, and he was supposed to ask for an autograph. And then when it went to Lauren McDonald, and he's kind of like in his early 30s, he was like, well, okay, so what's this character going to be like at my age? And it would be a selfie more than an autograph. So they kind of like twisted the story a little bit, like as they went on. So I think it was like a fun sandbox sort of indie filmmaking and ideas that they all brought stuff to the table. And yeah, I think I'm hoping that it gets a cinema release. As far as I know, it's not been announced, so it doesn't even have an IMDb page yet. So it's so hopefully we'll see more of it, and that can more people can see it.
Yeah, hope so.
Great. So Tummy Monster is hopefully coming out in cinemas, but will be definitely a high review from the both of you. So if you when and if you can check it out, please do. So next film you both saw at the Glasgow Film Festival, La Chimera. Gary, what's this film about?
Yep, so La Chimera is the latest film from director Alice Rohrwacher. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. And it's an art piece set in the Italian countryside about like a archaeologist turned criminal played by Josh O'Connor, who obviously a well-known British actor, but for most of the film he's speaking in Italian. And the film picks up where he's on a train, and he's just been released from prison, and there's this kind of like mystery around him as a character and what his motivations are, and he kind of reunites with this group of friends where they dig graves and sell off what they find, and it's kind of about, it's a strange film in terms of like how it looks at how you can kind of reconcile your past with your present, and there's lots of artsy ideas in this where the film kind of plays with the frame rate, it plays with the ratio, and it's quite a beguiling piece. It's like it's a very interesting one. So what did you think of it, Simon?
I really enjoyed it. I don't know that I enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed thinking about it afterwards, but it left such an impression on me that it's constantly been in my mind since watching it. It really dug itself into me and kind of buried itself like a hidden treasure. It's got an odd tempo, I think, that really made me wonder about the pacing while I was watching it, but in retrospect all comes together to create this kind of mythic resonance, because the story is kind of treading into kind of magical realism and blending that with kind of Italian neorealism in really interesting ways. There's kind of hidden things that are unearthed, hidden powers that are unearthed from these tombs, from these graves that the band of people are robbing, and Arthur himself is kind of this mythic leader figure. I don't think it's a coincidence that he named for King Arthur. He's this kind of British leader of these Italian thieves who is unearthing something from the ground, stealing from these tombs of long dead Europeans, long dead Etruscans, but unearthing something more mystical and more strange. And the film kind of asks, should he be unearthing this? Should he be going into these tombs? The obvious question to should you be a grave robber, the obvious answer to should you be a grave robber is no. But there's something more metaphysical as well. What is he unearthing when he breaks into these tombs? What is of real value to him? Is it worth his soul? Is it worth the souls of the people around him, the buried people that he is unearthing through his actions? So there's this kind of strange pace to it that felt a little disjointed while I was watching it, but has really stuck in my head afterwards. So I've just found myself thinking about it quite a lot since then, and how it engages with not only the subject matter, these kind of mythic resonances coming out of the earth, but how it engages with Italian cinema as a whole. It's got figures like Isabella Rossellini in it, who on screen kind of reminds you of the heritage of Italian cinema. Her father, Roberto Rossellini, and her mother, Ingrid Bergman. And you're kind of thinking of cinema while you're watching it because it's got this kind of 70s look of Italian cinema, of like Pasolini in particular. And it's blending this kind of mid 20th century Italian cinema, this kind of neo-realist take, with this magical realism that I believe is in Vorvaca's previous film Happy as Lazaro as well. And it just felt magical. It felt beautiful and deep and resonant in a really intriguing way for me. I keep saying it, but I couldn't get it out of my head.
Yeah, I think you kind of nailed it, saying that it's got a mythic resonance, because I was kind of the same as you, and I was kind of the same as when I watched the previous film that you just mentioned, Happy as Lazaro. Like, I came out of the film thinking, what have I just watched? And I don't know if I think I came out appreciating it more than enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly.
And then, like you say, like the themes kind of linger for days, and it is kind of one of the films I've kind of thought about the most since watching it. And I think that's a credit to the director, but also to the performance. Josh Connor, he's not a likable protagonist really, but he's like, there's just something about him that makes him so like watchable and compelling in terms of like how he even just watching him walking around, he's just got this like, I don't know, this kind of like charisma to it. It's hard to like put my finger on like why he's so great in it, but there's something, and I think that's kind of my feelings around the film as well. Like it's a little puzzle to unravel, and there's so much to it in terms of its themes, and I feel like in the moment a lot of it was going over my head. I feel like this film is touching upon things that I'm just not privy to, so I was kind of missing the point of some of it, but it does have like this kind of lasting resonance in terms of his actions and how he seems to be able to kind of justify it, and then how it starts to kind of eat away at his character throughout it. So yeah, interesting film, I would say, more than a entertaining one. But it's one that's stuck with me.
He's really good, Josh O'Connor. I haven't seen him in much apart from he played the young Prince Charles in 2 seasons of The Crown, which I thought was another interesting link to kind of King Arthur and this heritage of British leadership and this mythic line of British colonialism raiding European tombs. But he is so enigmatic. Like there's clearly something to him and to how he carries himself with this kind of quiet confidence. But there's hidden depths there that are never really revealed. He's holding these secrets inside himself. And the way he finds things is doing this odd kind of divination ritual, this odd dowsing ritual with a dowsing rod that he's he carries himself with this quiet assurance when he's doing it, when he's doing this strange ritual. That completely sells the character and completely sells what he's doing to this band of Italian thieves that he's joined up with. He's withholding something in his performance, but in a way that is really charming rather than annoying, and that just suggests so much about the character without doing anything. It's really remarkable.
I think just what you were saying about like it feels like a very internal performance, and go back to his previous work, his breakthrough performance was in a film by Francis Lee called God's Own Country, which was kind of like labeled as Britain's answer to Brokeback Mountain a little bit, in terms of it being a farmer who has a relationship with a farmhand, and he's a closeted homosexual who's clearly got a lot of he's very repressed, and he kind of holds in all this feeling in his character, and he seems to communicate that so well through his performances, and he does that again with this character in this film, because he's like brooding. He manages to be kind of like brooding and rude, but then also like oddly kind of, he's got that British politeness to him as well, even though he's kind of not a good guy, but then he acts like he is a good guy, and throughout the film you can really figure him out, and I think that's part of the charm of the film.
Yeah, I know he's got a part in Luca Guadagnino's new film, Challengers, with Zendaya, about tennis players, about a kind of romantic triangle between some tennis players. And I'm not interested in tennis or Luca Guadagnino, but Josh O'Connor has made me interested in maybe seeing this for his work alone.
Was that the film that was supposed to come out in Venice last year or something like that?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
But the strike prevented it, I believe.
Yeah.
So it's coming out.
Yeah,
shortly.
There was rumored to be the surprise film at Glasgow, and that was kind of like what people were thinking it was going to be.
Yeah.
I don't know when Challengers comes out in the cinema, but I know that La Chimera actually it's had its UK release date announced. It's the 10th of May for people that want to see it in the cinema.
Great. I will be, from hearing your reviews. It sounds like, and I really liked Happy as Lazaro as well. So I will definitely check it out on in May when it comes out. And so that wraps up our Glasgow film special. We did a bit about Do Not Expect Too Much from the End of the World as well before. So, but overall, very happy with this festival. I take it, both of you?
Yeah, I think a strong year. Maybe not as strong as last year, but still, it's a great festival. It's great for the city, and it's a really good opportunity to see a load of a high quality selection of films. You know, you're in for a good time at the Glasgow Film Festival.
Yeah, the program's always eclectic, and it was good this year. I actually went through and didn't get soaked, because I feel like every year I go through pouring down in Glasgow, and I'm kind of like scuttling between screenings and getting soaked, but I didn't. The rain stayed away on my one journey through there. And well, no, I actually I was looking back at when I had first covered Glasgow Film Festival, and it celebrated its 20th year this year, and realized that this was my 10th year covering it. So makes me feel a little like old that I've been covering these films for quite a while, but it's always an enjoyable trip to take through there to go back to the GFP and see a really cool program of stuff, and this year was no exception to that. Great.
And so a lot of these films, as we've talked about, are coming out in the cinema in the next couple months, hopefully, or if they're not, to check them out in any way that you can. Like you said, an eclectic program, but always sort of very popular with audiences, of sold out screenings, and a really great asset to Scottish film culture, the Glasgow Film Festival.
We've got our first guest on today. She's a stand-up comedian. She's from Glasgow. Her name is Janey. So, when did you first decide you wanted to be a stand-up comic?
It wasn't just about comedy. It was about having this sense of self and freedom. For the first time in my life, I got to be me.
Would you please welcome on stage our first fantastic queen of comedy, Janey Godley!
Under both breasts, I can get 2 Cornish pasties, 2 bottles of iron brew, and a sausage dog.
An actor, a best-selling author, and a multi-award-winning stand-up comedian, Janey Godley!
Hundreds of protesters demonstrated in Glasgow, Scotland's largest city, against Mr. Trump's visit to the UK.
Let him come here and see the signs.
Thanks, John. I mean, I can't believe we had to actually clear that up and tell people that they can't drink bleach or disinfectant. Frank, get the door! My name is Janey Godley. This has been the comedian at the Kings. Good night! Life had been going so well, but in an instant, it all come crashing down.
A Scottish Government COVID awareness campaign fronted by Janey Godley has been scrapped.
I have used phrases, comments with horrifically despicable undertones. First I get cancelled, and then I get cancer.
You all right? They are getting...
If she dies, this is going to be so awkward. All right, and so I'm back, and I'm here with John Archer, the director of Janey, which was the closing film for Glasgow Film Festival, but is now having its theatrical release on the 15th of March. So it will be in cinemas today when you listen to this. John, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for inviting me.
Great. So I loved your film, and I, I've lived in Scotland for a few years, and you can't not know about Janey, especially during the pandemic. But I know your work mostly as an executive producer, a producer of documentary films, and now you're directing this film. And I guess I wanted to ask why you wanted to direct this film in particular.
Probably 3 years ago, I pitched the idea of doing a documentary with Janey to BBC Scotland, and that wasn't the right time. They didn't want that. And so I sort of forgot about it. I've been involved with the National Theatre of Scotland and BBC Scotland in Scenes for Survival during the pandemic, where there were 55 actors who filmed themselves doing various short scripts, the most brilliant of which, in my view, was Peter Mullen's Fat Balls, which is possibly still on YouTube. I hope it is. FAT, then BAWS. And Janey did some of those, and they were really good. And so she was doing that, and she was doing the Nicola Sturgeon voiceovers, which were superb and very funny. And when I saw she was on tour, I thought, oh, that would make a good film. I'm sure somebody's going to be doing that. And then my colleague, Carolyn Sinclair Kidd, said, oh, we should be doing this. Come on, we should be doing this. Anyway, I got back in touch with Janey's agent. And there was indeed somebody who was also thinking of doing it. But he was very keen on our approach. And I met Janey literally just, I think it was 2 or 3 days before her tour started. And we got on well. And so we had cameras at the first day of her tour, which seemed important to get. And I also encouraged her daughter, Ashley, who is brilliant, to film her on her phone, which of course they were doing anyway. And Janey often, just very naturally takes out a phone and does a message to her fans to put on Facebook. And we just started doing this. And at the same time, I got in touch with likely funders like the BBC and Screen Scotland, and they were enthusiastic. And Alison from the Glasgow Film Festival, she was certain that unless the film was a complete disaster, she'd want it for the film festival. And that helps a lot to have that in your sights.
Yeah.
So we kept filming at various points on the tour. And at the Scottish Exhibition Centre, the big gig at the end of the tour, 3,000-seater, Janey's friend Shirley was there. And they'd been like Tweedledee and Tweedledum. They're just like, copies of each other, and they get on so well. And I thought, there's always this thing in a documentary where you're thinking of the big sit-down interview. Put that throughout the film. And I just thought it'd be much more natural to have Shirley with Janey going to various places with her and occasionally just chatting. So that was the approach we took. So when we wanted to film Janey having her chemotherapy, and by this point I'd got working with a great cinematographer, Laura Kingwell, who's just very low-key, completely self-sufficient, doing sound and the camera. And so on the day when she went to the Beatson with Shirley, which is in the film, I wasn't there, but I'd said to Shirley, I want you to talk to Janey about death, because we had to get onto that sometime. So that's the way it worked. Just as if when she went to Shirley's house in the film, I'd said to Shirley, I think this is a good time. Let's talk about the abuse by her uncle.
Yeah.
Writing about that in the book. So that's the way that worked. And then Shirley came with us to Belfast as well, which had one of my favourite jokes in the whole film. Janey, in front of a Belfast audience, says that her husband had been accused of being in the IRA. And he said, no, and I'll tell you for why. I can't take a fabric on my face. I couldn't wear a balaclava. Nothing else was an issue but wearing the balaclava. I love that one. And so did the Belfast audience.
There's so many great funny moments, and it really shows what an amazing talent that Janey is, the film does. And I really, really loved that, because this film could go on a totally different direction, especially with the life that she endured, or she's currently enduring. So it could have been a totally different tone, but I think you mix the tones really well together. I also think the thing you could come out of this is what a resilient woman Janey is, and through many different parts of her life, and how she keeps going, and it's really inspiring in that way. Why do you think now she felt like, I mean, I guess she's been a personality for a while, but why do you think now that, there's the second part of the autobiography and everything like that is an important time for her to tell her story? Obviously, it's a critical time, to tell her story, but why now do you think she's comfortable?
I think, the prospect of death puts those things into perspective. Ashley, her daughter, encouraged her to do a documentary now, because, if she doesn't tell the stories now, when would she have the chance? I think, she'd been cancelled because of the terrible things she said. But as she says, maybe cancer trumps cancelling, but it's not just that. I think that she sort of earned her way back, and there was a political aspect to the way that was all dealt with, because she was taking a government job doing the pandemic ads, and I think the Tory party sort of took against that in Scotland. But I think she was ready. And I think what was really lovely working with her, because I've been involved with films with lots of different people, from Gabriel Garcia Marquez to Billy Connolly and so on. There was nothing off limits. Nothing was too much for her. She was open to doing anything I suggested. She didn't particularly want her husband filmed, partly because of his family connections, but also, as she says very often in her show, he's autistic and uncomfortable around people. And that was fine. I don't think there's any reason ever for, if you're featuring an artist, you don't have to drag in their family.
Yeah.
Except, of course, Ashley, because Ashley is very much, she's in the same business. And that one of my favorite bits every time I see the film is the look of love on Janey's face.
Yeah.
She looks at Ashley, and often forgetting the camera's on, often she thinks she's told Ashley to turn off her phone, and she hasn't. And then Janey's face just relaxes. It's pure love, and they're best friends. But there's also sometimes Janey treats Ashley as if she's like a toddler. You know, she's still her toddler. And I've got a few children. I know that feeling.
Yeah. And I felt that too. I was having a strong relationship with my mother. I think the relationship between daughter and mother in this film is incredible and also raw. Like you see moments with Ashley really breaking down and thinking moments where, you know, on stage or off stage or right before where Janey's helping Ashley sort of cope with the grief. And I think it really it brings out such important topics that we all can connect with, but it also is very particular about their story, because that's maybe not how we would respond by getting up on stage and making fun of it, you know. So it's a really hard topic like cancer to talk about, and I think it was interesting how you've been able to talk about it in this film. So.
And there's a bizarre thing that's happened. You know, it really did feel a year ago when we were filming she might not last the tour, but now she seems in even better health. It's just like it's fired her up doing all this work.
You know, when you do see that scene, and I won't give too much away, but when you see the scene with Ashley, I did think about the fact that you are going on tour with Janey now, and if you could tell us a little bit about the upcoming screenings that are going to have Janey live as part of the events, which sound really great.
Well, you know, the typical way to approach this tour, particularly a Scottish tour of a film like this, would be you send the director, and if you can get them the subject on tour with the film, and you do a Q&A afterwards. And we just had the notion that if Janey goes on tour with the film, we can show the film. Actually, I think it's just occurred to me, we were thinking she might not be that well. So we could show the film, and then I sort of imagined her coming on quite ill to talk about it afterwards. And we'd agreed with Ashley that if Janey wasn't well enough, then Ashley would do that. But what's involved is we're showing the film, having a quick break, and then Janey will come on and do some stand-up about the filming with some outtakes. I haven't yet persuaded her to watch the outtakes. It's all very last minute, but that's the way she likes to work, I'm reassured. So she'll have a riff. She'll no doubt be very rude about me and very nice about Ashley. And we'll talk about what the filming was like. To me, she pays a very high compliment. She says when she talks about the filming is that I didn't really do very much. So I'm quite happy with that, because it means she didn't notice what had been happening. Anyway, so I'm sure she'll have a good hour of new things to make fun of and to observe about the world.
And obviously her response to the film in general, overall, what has she said about it?
Obviously, we were both. I mean, what she likes to do when we're doing things, she likes me to pick her up and take her to wherever we're going. So I picked her up and took her to our edits room. And on the way, we both were saying how nervous we both were, you know, for different reasons. Because, you know, you don't always want the subject. You don't always show a subject of a film, but in this case, obviously, it was different, and she didn't so much. So we were both very nervous, but then, it was huge relief. She was very happy, and she immediately put a video up online saying how happy she was with it. And then again on Sunday night at the premiere, she went through a different sort of wave of response, seeing it with everybody else. And she loved the fact that people laughed at the right places and found lots of things funny or whatever, or seemed to be crying at the right places. So I think, she's in it for the experience and for the sort of ride of emotions that her life is. She throws herself into it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting because the new John Galliano, Kevin McDonald film's coming out. That's about someone being cancelled, and Janey in the Scottish sense is a similar story. And I think, like you said, it's how I saw at the very beginning, you kind of you do very similar to what Kevin did, which is you kind of explain, here's the overview of this person. We know her as this and this and this, but then you get, by the end of it, you really get to see the whole person, and you tackle those kinds of things. How did you think, was that an important thing to how you approach how people might respond to it? Because obviously still people will have strong responses to what Janey said.
Yes, it was. We made it clear from the beginning that we wanted to talk about that. And it was something that we went back to, having sort of done a bit of an edit. We thought, no, we need a little bit more on this, because no, it's really important. And it's a really, things have changed a lot in the last 10 years since she made those remarks, and now. And even now, I think, should we put them up on the screen? But I think people needed to know what she said.
Yeah.
So that otherwise you imagine other things. And I was talking to somebody from the film festival who said we had a big debate about whether, we should ask you to blur some of those words. And so it is a live issue. We tackled it head on. And I hope that people will feel like I do, that Jane has sort of worked her way back. She's earned a place on the stage again.
One thing I really liked is, how you mixed the historical sort of, it wasn't like a linear, this is where she was born and this is where she ends up, you go back and forth. And I think that's one of the things that makes, biopics, challenging and interesting as well. I mean, can you talk a little bit about the editing of the film?
Yeah, so obviously we had various elements, like the big multicam recorded show, which we did the SEC, and we had Janey on the road, and we had an archive, and James Alcott, the editor, had the idea that we start with the lead up with Janey on stage at the SEC, and then we just use the material without saying where it was, and then we finish with her actually going up to the microphone. And I think that bookending works really well, because she's just about to do everything you've just seen. He was really good to work with. He also edited the Bill Douglas film.
Right.
And he edited his first feature doc. We did a couple of films with David Graham Scott that James edited. And then in 2018 with Divya Kate Chetty, Glasgow Love and Apartheid. And we've sort of persuaded James that, because he goes off and he directs and edits his own stuff, but we persuaded him that really we need him as a feature doc editor. And he's currently working on an Australian co-production we're doing on an event I'm sure you know well, called the Golden Spurtle International Porridge Competition.
I don't, and it sounds like my cup of tea and my kind of film. So that sounds like something I'll check out for sure.
Imagine the straight story meets a bunch of amateurs.
Yeah. No, that sounds incredible. No, I documentaries the editors are such an important part of the storytelling, and so it's incredible. Yeah, and I also really loved the editing and the Bill Douglas film as well. So so incredible to hear. You get Janey out of the film, and with everything out there, and it was really wonderful to see and really enjoyable. So I'm sure it will be a great success in cinemas and on TV or wherever it goes in the future. So thanks again, John, for taking the time to chat with me today, and best of see you around in Scotland for future events.
Thanks very much.
Okay, so that is our episode for March, and yeah, we've covered a ton. We've covered a ton of films, probably like it's so many films actually. I also feel like there's just been so many film events and film things, and now when we go to the multiplex, it's really just one film, like Dune. So I mean, are we all going to take a break, or are we looking forward to what does March and April have in store for us? Do you know?
No breaks really for me. The next film I'm going to see is Drive Away Dolls, which is a new film that was actually the surprise film at Glasgow Film Festival. So I'm going to go and see that on Wednesday, and I've got a couple of reviews already written for films that are coming out in the next couple of weeks. So Sacha Polak's Silver Haze, and a film called The Sweet East as well, which comes out at the end of the month. So more reviews coming from me, and well, I guess we're in this kind of middle period now between the award season, but before the summer blockbuster season. So we're in this kind of like interesting little gap, but I'm sure there'll be lots of good stuff to see.
Yeah, I am having a break. I'm all filmed out after the Glasgow Film Festival, doing reviews for TakeOneCinema.net and for reviewsperminute.simonxix.com. It's just been a lot. I was also on At the Movies in the 90s podcast discussing Matilda and The Witches. So I've just been watching a lot of films lately. So I feel like the need to have a break, maybe catch up on films that I've missed. I went to see Wicked Little Letters during the week because I didn't see it when it first came out. And yeah, maybe watch some older films or films that I want to watch that I'm not, watching for a review. Not that the films I've been watching aren't great, but just direct myself in a more Simon-led direction.
Fair enough. Yeah, I've seen lots of films as you guys have, and now showing films. So as I mentioned previously, we are showing Kim's video on the 30th, which is a documentary about a VHS store in collection in New York City that went to Sicily and back. And we're having the filmmakers on the 30th of March. And then Cemetery of Cinema, which I discussed as well, which is an incredible film that was also at the Glasgow Film Festival, but we're showing it in Edinburgh on the 17th of April. So 2 really fantastic documentaries about archive and film culture and across continents. And so we're really proud to be bringing those films. So if there is a film that you do see during this lull, we hope that you see these 2 films that Cinetopia is putting on. Other than that, we'll see you next month. And thanks again for joining us for the pre and the post of Glasgow Film Festival and all your Oscar predictions. I really appreciate all your input.
Thanks very much for having me back. That's always a pleasure.
Always happy to be here. Thank you.
Great. And we'll see you next time.